Alright everyone, so this is our first episode for Holus educational related content. In this episode, I will cover about the history and evolution of Holus since we started working on this idea of unlocking pixels. Here's what I have, our first version. This was the prototype made in December 2012. This was our first realization of how we could interact with sort of liberated pixels from multiple different angles. We specifically found this technique pretty interesting because it is cost effective, it is safe, and it has millions of colors that we can view through it, and it can be easily set up as well. Here's what we have is a very interesting prototype that does not have pillars. It is totally rested upon the weight of the pyramid itself. It is a detachable plate, and what I mean by plate is you can put any tablet on top of it, whether Android or iPad tablet. So the idea was, again, you would quickly transform the flat 2D content into a holographic content here once you rotate your iPad. So when you're looking at this with your iPad, you see normal content, but when you flip it, you see 4 different perspectives on it. So this was our first design, and we learned a lot from it. Some of the limitations I can mention is you'll have to kneel down every time, and it is not bigger in size. So it is not in particularly suitable for living room environments or environments indoor. It always needed some sort of way to lift it up. In fact, I can show you one interesting aspect of it. It has a standard mount at the bottom. That means you can have a tripod and you can mount it or mount on top of it. Any standard tripod would do. So this is our first version of Holus, almost 2.5 years back. This is our second version. From a lot of feedback that we got, we found out that the size is definitely not enough. So as you can see, an increment in size. It became much more bigger, and this is almost 25 centimeter in projection on each side. And here you can see it's made out of wooden structure. Our purpose was to get a bigger size, and the way we achieved was having an external display source that would be connected to any computing machine such as tablet, computers, or any other computing machine. Here you can see on the top we have a screen essentially which is of the resolution 5:4, and this is essentially projecting 4 different views on a symmetrical pyramid. So we do some post rendering in real time for all the content to black out some spaces. Now the interesting thing to note about this is not 1:1 aspect ratio, something that we are currently offering on Kickstarter, which I'll get to it on later on. What happens when it is not symmetrical? You really need to tuck away inside. You feel like the pyramid is hiding somewhere inside and it's not coming outside. And again, we face the same problem of kneeling down and sort of covering, sort of having neck problems and whatnot. It was not that natural at a natural height, perceivable height for anybody to see. One of the things, although we improved in this prototype apart from the size, was the film. I will go through different films here. As you can see, this film has a refraction and reflection rate of around 63%, and I will go through more other films. This has a reflection and refraction rate of around 73%, as you can see. So we started experimenting all these different kinds of films to understand the right amount of light that needs to pass through in different lighting conditions. So as you can see in this one, what we found here is 67% of light that actually passes through, and 33% of the light that bounces back. And we still weren't getting enough results, so we had to increase, and we had to experiment with some of the films, essentially having a higher bouncing rate for the light. such as pretty much inverted, 67% reflection and 33% refraction. So we found one of the major problems with this prototype, that it was not symmetrical in shape. This had two problems. One is we had to still tuck away inside. Our view was not that naturally through perceivable eyes, and it was pretty much blocked. And the other is the form factor. Sometimes the form factor makes a huge difference in terms of the way the product is designed, and many of these products need to be symmetrical. As you can see from top, it's not a symmetrical form factor. Moving on, so here is our first kind of dummy prototype. There is no screen here, but as you can see, it opens up like this. The idea was to have a modular screen, and it can essentially, we can pull out and put in another screen as needed. So it essentially became like a case for the screen. It's also made by an artist locally here. It's very well designed, and it very well portrays of, in fact, our current version on Kickstarter. So this is where we really started thinking about industrial design, how to better design this entire system, this Holus system, in a way that overcomes technical challenges as well. So here you can see how the pyramid has a little edge. It's pretty much coming outside the box. There's this feeling that the content is now much more bigger. This top bulkiness and bottom part is going away, and I can focus on the content. So this design was something much more interesting for us. And again, this is 30 centimeter, so it's now becoming bigger in size, and this is dependent on our research that we did so far. Now, one of the major challenges we faced at this point is there is no screen essentially that is 1:1 aspect ratio. You can make it, but they are just not available. It's the same kind of challenge that people would face in virtual reality market. You need to have a screen of a particular size to have a right experience. In our case, it was 1:1 aspect ratio. So we started essentially pretty much customizing and making our own panels. Here you can see it's a display board, and this part essentially computes, not only projects, but even computes specific amount of pixels that needs to be projected. And here this screen has a resolution of 960 by 960 on each side. And here you can see here is a panel, and essentially it's a multi-layered LCD panel that can project 450 lumens of brightness, candela per unit. So moving on to that, based on now our knowledge of industrial design and engineering, and making the right display with right amount of brightness, contrast ratio, amount of pixels, we actually made our first working prototype with the form factor that we want, with the features that we want. Here is Holus. Essentially it's a Holus home edition. The size is almost same. It's a 30 centimeter, but of course this is not how it would be. I'll explain you why. Here is a display panel. It's a display source that we worked on, and you can see it's so bulky, it's so fat, and it's actually very heavy. It's not light as this wooden structure. That's where we are going to be. So here, as you can see, and it requires 2 fans. It became really very hot. Like after 2 hours you can feel that this is very warm, and we wanted to overcome these challenges. So this is our Holus, I would say beta unit version of Holus, very close to what we wanted, at least the Holus Home Edition. And this was the right amount of size. Why? Because if I sit on a chair and if I put this on coffee table, there is nothing that's being obstructed. I can see completely entire view, and everybody can see and experience the same and interact at the same time. So this is our Holus Home Edition, essentially an early version of Holus prototype, where we actually had everything working. One of the interesting things to notice is it doesn't have now a tablet, a dock that I can rest my tablet on. We found that what if there was a tablet that comes, the dock that comes out, and I can rest my tablet upon. In that way, it can essentially rest, and it becomes a nice piece of a resting mechanism. And so those were some of the feedback that we got from others, and we found that would be really interesting to integrate. The other interesting suggestions we had, a lot of them mentioned, is it would be nice to have charging ports, because most of the time we found they will pair their smartphones with Holus and they will play for hours. In that case, they will run out of batteries, but if there are USB charging ports, then that wouldn't be a problem. So this is our almost ready Holus version. This was made somewhere around April, in the time frame of April to July of 2014. And here is our latest version that we are offering on Kickstarter. This is actually Holus Pro Edition. As you can see, it's much more larger, less bulky on top, less bulky on bottom. It has USB ports here, as you can see. There are 2 USB ports on this side. These are charging ports. And there are 2 USB ports on the other side, so making 4 in total. Now, one of the interesting features to notice here is the resting dock that I was talking about previously. Here you can see that there is a HDMI port, and this is actually a USB port. I have just connected an extra cable so that I can directly connect my tablet to it. For example, iOS tablet in this case. In our previous version, I would like to mention that we actually thought of embedding our own processing unit. One of the problems with that is programming your own content. If there is a processing unit inside, then it's really hard to actually directly program Holus, because it's divided into 4 different sides, and you will need still a flat 2D screen to program content for the Holus, or design application, or design different kinds of experience. That's why we thought, well, everybody has computing devices. Why don't we decouple that part? Why don't we provide the right input terminals, input ports, so that they can connect any devices, whether Windows, Mac, even Xbox and PlayStation, tablet, any device they have, and transform essentially their entire content into Holus compatible content. So this was the idea behind providing these ports, and this is exactly what we are offering on Kickstarter right now. On the top, we have some really neat features. There's a button here that essentially turns on and off the entire Holus. So when you're not using it, potentially you can shut it down. I can also open this up, and I can show you a very interesting advancement that we made in the display panel. Now, this display panel before this was 975 by 975 in resolution. This one here is doubled, 1960 by 1960 in resolution. That means now we are projecting many more pixels on each side, and the experience is much more smoother, much more cleaner, and it has and the colors are much more visible. You don't see pixelated edges. You don't see any kind of anti-aliased content is what I would say. Here we also overcame problem of heating. Like I mentioned in the beginning, we had a problem of heating. We also overcame the problem of form factor of the display itself. For example, we want now it's much more thinner, as you can see. And we also designed our own special breakout board so that you can have this input terminal ports again at the bottom. Very easy to connect. Moreover, this has embedded ambient light sensor and embedded speakers, high definition speakers. That means you do not require pretty much any additional hardware except for your own computing device, which would be a tablet or a computer or Xbox or PlayStation. You won't require anything else. Everything is embedded inside Holus. Now I'd like to explain a little bit about ambient light sensor. I mentioned previously how we were experimenting on different films to allow right amounts of light to be passed under different lighting conditions. But we thought, okay, lighting conditions are changing all the time. How can Holus smartly adjust to different lighting conditions? And we found out a pretty neat solution in the form of embedding ambient light sensor only in Holus Pro though. In Holus Pro, the ambient light sensor adjusts the amount of light that needs to pass through directly through the display panel depending on the amount of light that it detects in the environment. So for example, if it is too bright, then it will go for maximum brightness. So the amount of light that is being reflected is directly proportional to the amount of light that's in the environment. So for example, if it's more dark, then it doesn't need to be so much bright. In that case, more interestingly, what happens is, because it can directly control the brightness now depending on the ambient light, it can now also save energy, which is pretty interesting. So in a darker environments, Holus Pro actually saves energy and it becomes an eco-friendly product in that sense. So there's the auto eco view option in this which allows you to do that. So these are all the progress that we have made so far through all these prototypes. Every little detail has been covered through this, and a lot of different prototyping experiments, as you can see, that has gone. And here on the wall you can see a lot of industrial design, a lot of technical details that has gone into it, even designing some of the characters that would be more naturally perceived, with whom we can have natural and symbiotic relationship. So this is Holus. This is the history and evolution of Holus. One thing I would also like to say is right from the beginning we always had this idea of software development kit, which means making Holus an open source platform, which means that open source SDK would be provided along with it that allows developers to create content for it. Now we are going to explain in our other episodes how Holus provides the digital holographic experience, which means how does it do dynamic perspective correction and dynamic stitching. So look out for us, and thanks for support, because evolution needs to happen and we need to get there sooner, and we can only do that with your support. Thank you.